All right, let's dive into something that's, both super personal but also universal: personal growth. And this isn't going to be some abstract theoretical talk. We're getting into a practical guide for understanding who you are right now, and maybe more importantly, for taking the wheel on who you want to become.
So, I want to start by asking you something directly. Just think about it for a second. When was the last time you really, truly paused to consider that? I mean, with the absolute chaos of daily life, it's so easy to just get swept up, to keep moving without even knowing where you're headed.
And this quote from Margaret J. Wheatley, wow, it just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Without that pause for reflection, we're essentially flying blind. We risk creating a life that just happens to us instead of one we actually build on purpose. And that brings us right into our first section here, the unexamined life. This is exactly what happens when we just let ourselves run on autopilot. This autopilot state, well, you can think of it as drifting. It's when your day is just a series of reactions, reacting to emails, to notifications, to whatever life throws at you. You're not actually shaping your path. And the real danger here is that you can feel incredibly busy, but not actually be moving toward a future you've chosen for yourself.
So, how do we stop drifting and start steering? Well, the answer is to build what I like to call a self-reflection toolkit. So let's unpack a few really powerful, really practical tools you can start using like today.
First up, journaling. And look, this is just a private conversation with yourself. You're not trying to write a masterpiece. The whole point is just to get your thoughts out of your head and onto a page where you can actually look at them. And over time, you'll start to see things, patterns you never noticed before. Like, I always doubt myself right before a big meeting. That's the kind of gold that journaling uncovers. And if you're staring at a blank page thinking, okay, now what? Try these prompts. Asking, what am I proud of, isn't just nice, it actively builds your confidence. And asking, what challenges did I face, helps you see just how much you're growing. These simple questions make reflection a real, concrete habit.
Now, if writing just isn't your jam, that's totally fine. Mindfulness meditation is another amazing tool. And please, don't let that word intimidate you. The idea is so simple. You just observe your thoughts without getting caught up in them. It's like sitting back and watching clouds drift by in the sky. You see them, you acknowledge them, and you just let them pass. It's a practice that builds incredible clarity, which, funny enough, connects perfectly to what Plutarch was saying centuries ago. The work we do on the inside, observing our thoughts, understanding our own reactions, that stuff directly changes our world on the outside. It all starts from within. And the last tool in our kit is about finding your compass, your core values. And when you look at it this way, the difference is just stark. Without that compass, you're drifting, making reactive decisions, probably on a pretty unfulfilling path. But once you know your values, drifting becomes navigating. Reactive decisions become aligned choices. You're no longer just on some path, you're on a purposeful journey. Okay, but even with the best tools in the world, there is a giant roadblock that stops almost everyone. Let's get real and talk about the big one. The fear of failure. The most important thing you can do here is to completely reframe how you see failure. Your fear tells you that failure is an endpoint, a sign of weakness, something you have to avoid at all costs. But a growth mindset? It flips that script entirely. An endpoint becomes a stepping stone. A weakness becomes a lesson. And something to avoid, that becomes a golden opportunity to get data for your next try. This mental shift is quite literally a game changer. And what this really means is that we have to learn to embrace being uncomfortable. You know that feeling when you're a little unsure, you're stretching yourself? That isn't a sign to run away. That's the signal that you're in the growth zone. Real, lasting change almost never, ever happens when we're feeling safe and cozy. So how on earth do you stick it out when things get uncomfortable? With self-compassion. Think of it as your own personal psychological safety net. When you stumble, and you will, we all do, it's about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd give to a good friend. It's reminding yourself that a mistake doesn't define who you are. That's how you build real resilience. All right, so we've got the tools. We have a new way of looking at fear, but what does all this actually look like in the real world?
Let's check out a couple of examples of growth in action. Take Michelle Sylvan, for instance. She came up with this brilliant framework called the 4Rs method. It's so simple. First, you recognize that something needs to change. Then you release the old habits that are holding you back. Third, you reflect on what you're actually learning. And finally, you readjust your approach based on that new info. It's a simple, repeatable cycle for making changes that actually stick.
Now, let's switch gears and look at this through the eyes of author Steven Pressfield. He has this amazing radical idea. Fear isn't your enemy. It's a guidepost. That feeling of resistance, of being scared, that doesn't mean you should stop. It means you're pointed in exactly the right direction, towards something that really, truly matters to you. So if fear is a guidepost, how do you follow it? Pressfield's answer is simple: discipline. You don't just sit around and wait for inspiration to strike. You connect with it by showing up every single day and doing the work. When you treat your growth like a professional, you learn to use that fear not as a wall that stops you, but as the very fuel that drives you forward.
Okay, we've covered the why and the how. We've talked about what it looks like. So to wrap things up and help you take that very first step, let's look at a few excellent resources to get you started on your journey. Two really great starting points are the book, The 4 Agreements. It's a super practical guide to personal freedom. And if you're more of a listener, Oprah's Super Soul podcast is just a goldmine of amazing, deep conversations with all sorts of thinkers on these exact topics. So there we have it. We've talked about why reflection is so crucial. We've filled up your toolkit. We've reframed fear not as an enemy, but as a guide. The whole journey to understanding yourself really does begin with just one small step. So the only question left to ask is, what's your step gonna be?